The Arkansas Razorbacks have been through a pretty tough time recently. For a program that has legendary teams, players, and coaches, the 4 years before this season were a struggle. But then, a shift happened. The Razorbacks have suddenly become a competitive team that can go toe-to-toe with top 10 teams and can seriously run the tables at the SEC West and even the FBS at large. This most recent 2021 Arkansas football team quite literally changed the way the modern football fan looks at the Arkansas program. I'm Kevin Redfield from the Dropout Sports, and let's get right into it. But wait, hold up. Before we get into it, I just gotta ask y'all to like this video and subscribe to the Dropout Sports YouTube channel. Alright, let's get back into it. As with most teams, the players are the ones that are getting the results on the field, but it seems like with a lot of teams, the shift is happening at a time just when a new coach is coming in. And that culture-changing coach for the Razorbacks, his name is Sam Pittman. Pittman was a journeyman coach dating back to the late 80s who worked his way up from high school coach to offensive line coach at 11 different colleges. He's been a part of so many different types of teams and different conferences, and has recently built his name up to be a coach that can be a big part of the recruiting process and help build a program up. When it came to the job at Arkansas being opened up in 2020, he was going to be up against some steep competition with guys like Lane Kiffin and Mike Leach. But from the beginning, it seemed like Pittman was tailor-made for being the Hogs head coach. He had been at Arkansas during the Bielema days from 2013 to 2015 and saw firsthand a winning Arkansas team and what it takes to win in the SEC. He was there when NFL starters like Hunter Henry and Trey Flowers were a part of the team. And during his time there, he did coach up multiple linemen to get drafted and play in the NFL. Kiffin and Leach are both amazing coaches that ended up signing to teams in the SEC West in Ole Miss and Hail State respectively. But looking back on it, it looks like Arkansas made the right choice in picking Sam Pittman. Pittman surprisingly started off his tenure with a bang in 2020 when he took the Razorbacks to a 3-7 record. Alright, that might not seem like anything huge, especially coming off a couple of 2-win seasons, but the beauty of this season is all in the details. During this one-of-a-kind pandemic season, the SEC decided that every team would play an interconference schedule, meaning that unlike in previous years where the Hogs had 4 games that they could pick weaker opponents or money games, they had to play every single game against the big boys. Couple that up with the fact that they hadn't won an SEC game in 3 years before then, and I think you can see where I'm going with this. Pittman's first 2 wins as the Arkansas coach came against the then number 16 ranked Mississippi State and Ole Miss, the very 2 teams that housed the coaches that he was competing with for the Arkansas job. He also won a game against Tennessee, and what I find most impressive is that he coached a team that was very young and inexperienced. They had a starting quarterback and running back who had been fresh off the transfer portal, a wide receiver 1 and 2 duo that were only sophomores, and a defense that was mostly made up of juniors, sophomores, and guys that would end up returning the next year. Add in the fact that they had the second toughest schedule in all of college football, and it really does look like a recipe for disaster. But they made it work, and sometimes they had to get ugly for it. Although their team stats weren't exactly eye-popping, they improved across the board from previous years and actually forced more turnovers than they had. While 2020 was a moderate success for Pittman and the Razorbacks, the next season would yield a leap forward that few programs have seen in recent years. I'll touch on some of the finer points later, but for right now, I want to focus on the way that this Arkansas team played that sets them apart from teams of previous years. During the failed tenure of Chad Morris, there was an attempt to transition the Arkansas Razorbacks into a more pass-heavy team. But when you look at this year's team, as much as I love Treylon Burks and KJ Jefferson, they fully embraced the run game. With the 3-headed monster in the backfield of Traylon Smith, Dominique Johnson, and a true freshman in Raheem Sanders, as well as starting quarterback KJ Jefferson leading the team with 664 yards, they ended up being the 9th best running team in all of the FBS with 223 rushing yards per game. In an era where the SEC is full-on embracing the pass game and the air raid is becoming the norm, Sam Pittman and offensive coordinator Kendall Briles decided to embrace the run and use it to help with the passing game. Along with running the ball, The run-pass option, or RPO for short, is the other weapon that Arkansas decided to embrace. Quarterback KJ Jefferson was and still is a living unit with all of the weapons that he has at his disposal. As mentioned before, he has the mobility to make him dangerous on the ground. And with 21 passing touchdowns and only 4 interceptions, he is efficient with the ball. And that's not even taking into consideration his 9.1 yards per attempt. He would regularly use his athleticism and his wits to decide whether they should run the ball or pass it within a split second. And I know it's becoming the norm of the RPO in the NFL and college, but I just want y'all to take a step back and look at what that means for a minute. KJ Jefferson, a first-year starting quarterback, is put into a system where he's making split-second decisions that effectively change the entire play's outcome. They ran a system that took advantage of all the talent they had at running back. Their athletic 245-pound, and yeah, you heard me right, 245-pound quarterback. And I didn't even mention their worst-kept secret, Treylon Burks. 6'3", 225 pounds, potentially 4.3 speed, all natural stick-'em hands and route running skills that can make ankles straight up break. If you're watching this video and haven't heard the name Treylon Burks yet, we'll get used to it. He's been the leading receiver for the Razorbacks for the last 3 years, and this season, he had just under 40% of all receiving yards with 1,104. He's declared for the draft, and according to multiple analysts, including my guy Tristan Kuhn over at TWSN, he's about to raise his stock immensely in the NFL Combine. To most, Burks is projected to be a late first-round pick, and I'm telling y'all right now to watch out for him in the NFL for the next 10 or so years. All right, but back to the Razorbacks. The offense may have had the big names and plays, but the most impressive turnaround over the past 2 years was the defense. In 2019, they were the 7th worst scoring defense in all of the nation. In Pittman's first year in 2020, where they played all SEC teams, mind you, they were only 2 points better on defense, but they had a very young team that showed a monstrous amount of promise, especially in the secondary and linebacking cores. Now, in this most recent season, they've blossomed into a reliable and even dangerous defense that allowed less than 23 points per game. Yeah, they didn't create that many turnovers, but they had 3 players that had over 100 tackles, and a secondary that allowed less than 59% of opposing passes to be completed. Stars like Bumper Poole, Hayden Henry, and Jalen Catalon, who did only play for half the season, made the plays they needed to and stopped more than half of the teams they went against from scoring over 20 points. So what's next for the Razorbacks? Well, I've got some good news and some bad news, and I'll start with the bad news. The defense is taking the biggest hit, with linebackers Hayden Henry and Grant Morgan graduating, and their secondary losing virtually everyone. Jalen Catalon is projected to be a day 2 draft pick. Greg Brooks Jr. and Joe Faucha are transferring, and Monteric Brown is also trying his luck with the NFL draft. Treylon Burks and Treylon Smith are also leaving, putting a hole in the offensive progress previously made, in particular with Treylon Smith transferring out. This has been a point of contention with a lot of teams as the transfer portal has dominated the headlines, and for Arkansas, yeah, it's no different. With that said though, I think the portal is going to low-key help Arkansas. While they did lose Burks, they're going to get a former 5-star wide receiver Jaden Hasselwood from Oklahoma. Without Treylon Smith, Sam Pittman still has 2 amazingly talented running backs in Sanders and Johnson, and multiple talented defensive players have transferred into Arkansas from rival SEC teams. The future might be uncertain due to these changes, but what Sam Pittman and company have accomplished in just 2 years should not go unnoticed. Pittman inherited a team on the verge of a Kansas-like destiny and created a team that could run the tables in the SEC West. They've beaten a top 10 A&M and have gone possession for possession with elite teams like Alabama and Ole Miss. And look, I'm not saying Arkansas is going to be back into the glory days of Frank Broyle or Lou Holtz, but the Razorbacks might just have something special that they can carry into a promised future. Thank y'all for watching.
Just a bunch of dropouts.